you, Loretta, for choosing my online critiquing service. The painting that you've done is very convincing, and you said as you're a second year art student, you've just gone into your second year, you'd like a hard critique. So that's what we'll do. Your painting works well, there's a lot of positive things about it, which I'll talk about shortly, but there are some technical problems that I'd like us to have a look at, and I'm sure that you'll be able to turn a pretty good painting to a great painting without a great deal of effort. So let's have a look at those. The first thing we need to do is I need to do when I'm critiquing someone's work, is to identify why they're producing it. What's the purpose, the role? Now I understand that you're doing it for a class project, it's one of your assignments, you have to do that, but I'm just wondering with this painting, what is it that you wanted people to feel or think when they see it? I need to know that a little bit further down the track. What you have done well is you've got good consistency, variety of technique, good eye path, it's slick, your drafting's good, it is convincing as I said, but there are a few little problems. So let's have a look at those problems at the very beginning. The first one is to do with light source. Now, when anyone looks at a painting, they should know exactly where the light's coming from and the time of the day, and ideally the season, and that helps to understand the narrative, to understand the story. For the artist, it's important to know the time of day because that's when you put in your highlights and also your shadows. So let's have a look at that. On your painting, what we notice is that there's a dominant light comes down from here. So that would suggest the light's in the southwest. It's probably late afternoon. It's hitting this landmass here, here and here and through there. And largely that's where most of the light's coming from. That's fine. But there's a small problem too. And it is difficult to see on the camera from way back there, but on your lighthouse just here, it's lit from the side here. And that would suggest that the sun is over there, north, and also low in the horizon, because you've done the rendering, the shadows on this side, when it should be on the other side. So that's one little problem. There's another problem where there's another light source as well. And I suspect this happened because you probably painted it at different occasions instead of doing it all at one go. And that is down through here. We can see the lights coming in at this sort of angle as if it's early morning. And so there's a problem there. So it's important that you have a very consistent light source, so therefore you know exactly where to put the highlights and the shadows. So that's to do with overall lighting. We'll come back to that. Your painting does have atmospheres, so that's great. That's a good positive thing. It's got nice lighting. And we'll come back to colour and tone a little later. The second thing is to look at is the eye path. And the eye path is really important. And the eye path is important because it's the pathway that takes our eye through the painting. Now, the average time a person looks at a painting is only 3 seconds. So it's important that our eye path goes to several important things in the painting, coming to the focal point, and then ideally leading the eye out so they come back around. Let's have a look at yours. Now, you have been aware of the eye path. You've done a good job because here the viewer comes into this pathway here. Why the eye comes in this section here is because you've got all these stops and objects here. So your eye comes in through here, comes to this rock which acts as a stop, sends our eye back through here, we come back through here, but our eye can't go any further because we've got these other stops. The landscape that's there. When you look up here, the land here is pointing out, and our eye comes up here, has a brief look at the lighthouse, only a brief look, and then goes out here and towards this island and out. Now that's not a bad start, but there's a few problems with that. Let's have a look at this pathway. The pathway is good because there's no obstruction, it's nice and flat, so our eye comes in here. But what you'll notice is we've got this big clump of grass and we've got this big rock. Now our eye goes to those two things because there's the most detail there and also because there's the greatest contrast. And our eye always goes to the area of the greatest contrast. So our eye bumps back and forth through there. Now the problem is not only that it goes back and forth, and it goes back and forth because that's called divided interest. So we don't know which way to go. But we'd expect that there would be more rocks, not this just single rock there, and not just one big clump of grass. There should be grass elsewhere. I know there's a clump of grass way back here, but we need a bit more. Anyway, so we come along through here, and as we say, we go on that journey. The problem is, I don't really know what this painting's about. And so, how do you want people to feel and think about it? Well, what's the important part? There should be some place that's more important in the painting than somewhere else. So, my eye comes through here and goes out. Now, the problem is that it goes out halfway, and so our eye isn't drawn back in to have a look again. But there's another problem to do with divided interest. Not only does our eye bounce back and forth here, because they're almost on the same plane and they're the same visual weight, that's an important one. Then we come up through here, our eye also bounces between these two things. Now, even though the lighthouse is really small, it has the same it has a lot more importance than a clump of grass, so it has a visual weight, and so our eye bounces back through there. And there's a triangle that happens too, because as our eye goes out here, we see this stark piece of landscape there. It's the line, and it goes back and forth. So we have a triangle effect here, and our eye doesn't really go out and come back and down into the picture. It's kind of stuck. To a lesser degree, there's also a square that happens here, so our eye bounces around there. I'm going to show you how we might fix that up a little bit further in the painting. So, that's that problem. Now we've also got an issue to do with tone and colour. Now, if the colour looks good, it's nice and atmospheric, that's great, that's really good. And colour is probably one of those things that everyone thinks is so easy to work with, but in fact it's really, really difficult, because colour also has tone in it. Unless you have the right amount of tone in the right places, some things recede and some things advance when you don't want them to, or they're just flat. Now, so for example, I'll show you a slide soon which shows you that tonally the landscape, the foreshore here, and the water is of the same tonal value, and so therefore it's very flat through there. And so there's a problem too. You'll also notice that in the water, all the water is essentially the same colour and same tone. We don't have any shadows dropping anywhere to help us identify where the light is. So there's no shadows, it's all rather flat. But in that waterscape, we'd expect to see a lot more variety of colour and a lot more variety of tone, but the two should be separated. One shouldn't flow into another. You've got good tonal variation here with the landscape. What we've also got to remember is the stronger the light, the stronger the shadow. So, for example, when we have a really strong light on some of these waves through here, we'd also have a very good shadow. Not incredibly dark, because light's being reflected all over the place, but that's also a problem. So I'll show you shortly another slide where we have the landscape and the sea melting into each other. So that needs to be fixed in some way. It's only a small thing, but it can be fixed. Right, so there's that couple of problems there. We've looked at colour, and the colour generally through the painting is pretty good, but actually on that, let's talk about something else. There's a small problem with aerial perspective, and that is the further something goes away, the further the landscape is, the more blue, fuzzy, grey it becomes. And so there's not a big difference between the aerial perspective on that land mass there and this one here, and in fact there's a tiny bit of land way off in the distance. That one way off in the distance should be really out of focus and quite blue or slightly purple if you want to add a bit of colour. So there's a problem there with aerial perspective, sending that on. There's also a problem with our eye path, and how we could fix that eye path up, I might deal with that right now, is if we had some other thing happening here, because we've got the painting which is weighted far too much on the left hand side. We've got this big landmass here, we've got all that there, and everything goes off to nothing. Even the landscape falls down here on the right hand side. So what I intend to do is show you what this is like doing it digitally, but where we put a clump of grass over here, more grass so it looks nice and natural. It also builds up the land through here, but we've got to have something else over here to counterbalance the land here, to keep that equilibrium going. Now that will do two things. It'll balance the picture up and look far more interesting, but we want to have the eye being directed back, because at the moment we've got all these pointers going, look out that way, look out that way. So I'm going to suggest that we have something not on the same plane here, which causes our divided interest, but something further back there to get our eye back there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in a couple of little sailboats. They'll be done digitally, they won't be painted in, and that will have the effect of having a point of interest, because then this is a picture about going to the seaside and there are those boats out there. That's also an attention getting device, because the boats are moving. Won't just have one, because there's a problem with one lighthouse, one little island. We want to have two, so therefore it looks like maybe they're having a race, and also just it's far more interesting. So they'll be back through there. Now what that'll do is that'll counterbalance some of the things that are happening here, get our eye looking there. But ideally, what we need to do is build the landscape up. Now there's not much we can do to change the landscape here, but we can use the sky as a device to counterbalance all the weight over here. Now how we do that is by having a large cloud coming here, over here, and that will balance that out. So using the sky is a really good way of balancing out a picture or adding something that's dynamic. Now on that too, we're talking about drafting. As we go further to the landscape, our clouds become compressed, a lot smaller, and that gives you a lot of really good distance. So that's what we're going to have a look at. Let's have a look at some of those slides right now.